Good morning, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. This show is brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm the host, Jeff Dee. Our guest co-host today is Vic Farrow, and our guest today is Ashley Perrien. Ashley, have you been on the show before, or is this your first time?
I have been on the group shows, like
like in the mass audience.
And whatever, yes.
Yeah.
But this is the first time being a guest.
Ashley is another member of the Atheist Community of Austin, and is helping us out tonight to fill the guest chair. What do you do for a living, Ashley? Just so the folks at home know a little more about you.
I am
Apart
a phone
from shave your head. You're a customer
service. I work for a computer company doing phone support, so I'm on the phone 24/7.
The Atheist Community of Austin is a non-profit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. This episode is being taped on December 12, 2000 CE. Normally we do a live show, but every once in a while we have to run tapes, and this is one of them, so there will be no calls for those of you who are regulars watching. Don't bother to pick up those phones. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday morning at the Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop at 307 West 5th Street, starting 10:30 or 11 o'clock a.m. every Sunday, except for the first Sunday of the month when we have our lecture series at 11 a.m. in the Longhorn Room of Fur's Cafeteria in North Cross Mall. And we have different speakers every time. Those are free and open to the public, as are our regular meetings, but just advice to those of you who are going, oh goody, atheists that I can preach to, please don't do that at our meetings. This show is our outreach to the public, where when we're taking calls, we encourage you to call in and tell us why you think we ought to believe. ACA board meetings take place at noon right after our regular meeting on the second Sunday of every month. These meetings are open to all ACA members, but you can only vote if you're on the board of directors. And the Godless Gamers meet every Monday night at 7:30 at the home of Vic Farrow. This is Vic right here.
This is my home.
The Godless Gamers, yes it is. It's our little impromptu studio.
Yeah.
The Godless Gamers is a spin-off group of the Atheist Community of Austin, one of several social and special interest groups that we have. And I always mention it because I started it, and it's my baby. But we get together and we play board games and card games and role-playing games and any other sinful game entertainment activities that various religions would say are evil.
We do that evil.
We haven't actually done gambling though, right? Poker is one of the few things we haven't done.
I don't think there's anybody in the group that actually likes poker.
No, that's not. Who knows?
I'm big into the normal card games.
Yeah, me neither.
For more information, you can call our voicemail at 371-2911 or visit our website at www.atheist-community.org. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you.
Vic, yes, thanks very much for allowing us to use your living room as our studio.
It's almost a tight fit getting us all in here.
Yeah, well, it's expedient.
This is an old familiar position, being the co-host.
That's right. You were our actual co-host at the beginning of the year 2000. That's 2000 for those of you who want to say it that way. But good friend of mine, Ray Blevins, taught me that the right way to say it is 2000. Yeah, you were the actual co-host for several weeks until you decided you just didn't like it. Almost 2 months.
Yeah, I miss being in the control room with all the gadgets. And
well, you're missing it again. Not that we have a lot of gadgets here at our disposal today.
Yeah, after spending about a year behind there doing things and being frantic all the time, sitting out here was a little on the slow side.
Really?
So,
it's going to be even slower without calls, but please, stick with us, folks. We will make this as entertaining as we possibly can. As entertaining as humanly possible. No gods involved. I got a little bit of news, which is normally the co-host thing, but, I came prepared. Let's see. Now, there was a thing in the news that there was some discussion of earlier in the month of December about was it Anglican bishop in Britain basically saying in one of his sermons that he's basically throwing up his hands and saying, I don't know what to do. Britain has become atheist. Nobody cares about the fate of their immortal soul anymore. Nobody thinks that churches are really adding anything to their lives, and so attendance is down. And he was basically just bemoaning the fact that Britain had become an atheist nation.
To which we say,
yes. Great! Jihad, wish that could happen here. We're working on it. Well, at least we're giving people that option. But since then, there's been a public opinion poll by BBC Radio 4, and I've got some of the statistics that they compiled. It seems that Archbishop was a little bit overreaching. According to this poll, only 38% of their population are atheist, meaning they clearly stated that they believe in no gods or goddesses at all. Of course, that's way more than twice as many as it's like about 3 times as many as we have here in the U.S. percentage-wise.
Well, 3 times as many in the U.S. who actually admit to being atheist.
Well,
I gotta
there's that.
think that the actual number of atheists is much higher than the statistics because of the stigma that's attached to the A word.
That's true.
And
well, if
also,
you're watching from home and you don't believe in any gods, but you're afraid to stand up and call yourself a non-believer, take heart. You're not alone. Britain is just full of us, people. They got 1% Muslims, which is strange because I remember there was this whole joke going around that London was overrun with Arabs. That was like a whole thing people used to say about Britain. Apparently, the Arabs they've got ain't Muslims, or there aren't that many of them. 62% of the population are theists, meaning anything from having their own vague idea of a divine presence to total fundamentalism. Right, so that it would include your deists and your pantheists, your certain kinds of pantheists. I know we got pantheists in our group who somehow argue that doesn't really involve any gods. That's a topic for another show. 1% of the population believe the Genesis accounts of creation. 1% of people in Britain take Genesis literally. 96% of young people, doesn't say exactly what age that is, say that they have no ties to any type of organized religion at all. 96% of young people.
The future is looking good.
Well, I had a brother who spent several years in England for business reasons, and he really didn't like it. But which is not an insult to any British people watching our show. I don't know any of the details. 55% of the population. I should also mention that he's not a theist, so it wasn't because it's got so many atheists there. 55% of the population are able to. 55% of the population are able to state what Easter commemorates.
So,
right?
over
so
half.
45% of the people in Britain have no idea what Easter is all about.
Well,
I mean, we're not in favor of ignorance. I mean, we're atheists. We know what Easter is all about.
Exactly.
It's about the bunny that lays the chocolate egg. 4% of the population attend Christian church regularly. 4%. Now that's what that Archbishop was talking about, okay?
Yeah.
He was talking about warm butts in the pews.
Church attendance in England has been steadily declining over the last few years, though.
Yeah.
And it's declining in the United States, too. They just don't admit it as much.
14% of the population say they attend church on Easter Sunday.
That would be your...
So of their 62% of theists, only a small portion of those actually attend church on Sunday. I wonder how many of those are the ones who know what Easter commemorates. This makes Britain the least religious country in the world.
Second only to the Netherlands.
Second least religious country in the world. Second only to the Netherlands. We don't have those statistics on the Netherlands, but I'll try to dig them up. Go Netherlands. And I don't know where America is, but it's somewhere way near the bottom of the barrel. Okay, here's some news. Heeding a judge's order, workers removed a Ten Commandments monument from the Lawrence County Courthouse in Indiana on Friday. Though that was a Friday earlier in December, and I can't remember the exact date. Oh, excuse me, that was actually in November of 2000. A lone protester delayed the work momentarily by standing in the path of a truck carrying away the monument until a policeman persuaded him to give up. He said, "This is wrong. Our country was built on the Ten Commandments. What are they going to do? Just do away with it?" Well,
We hope so.
in a legal sense, yeah. No, our country is not founded on the Ten Commandments, and we can get into the Ten Commandments later because that's always just a fun topic, and I got some stuff on that. Faith healers lose appeal. It's not what you think. Faith healing couples must take sick children to doctors or face convictions. That's criminal convictions, says the Pennsylvania State Superior Court. The appeals court, again early in November, rejected Daniel and Anne Marie Foster's claim that the prosecution had failed to prove that they acted in a lame and meager way when they turned to prayer rather than a doctor to help cure their son Patrick of a cancerous tumor that almost killed him. Quote, "The law imposes an affirmative duty on parents to seek medical help when the life of a child is threatened, regardless and in fact despite their religious beliefs," said Judge Joseph Haddock for the court.
Good.
Yes!
Great.
Yes!
That's just the...
I am so sick to death of weirdo supernaturalists ignoring modern medical science for the sake of their crazy beliefs and harming people.
When you let if you could sit there, I don't understand how a parent could sit there and watch their child die to satisfy whatever religion, knowing full well that there's treatment available. How do you do that?
And actually, this was brought up at one of our meetings. Somebody brought up that somebody in their family was sick.
Yeah.
And they said that they would not take them to the hospital because, again, it was in God's hand. If God wanted them healed, He would do it.
Right.
They ended up tricking them.
Right.
Saying, God put doctors here for you.
Right.
And so then they went. Then they were okay with that.
But you had to rationalize it that way in order to get them
Exactly.
to pull their mind out of their holy book and go to a doctor when they're sick.
Exactly. Hundreds of years of experience and trial and error and education have done nothing. God put them here, so it's okay. We can go to them now.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I mean,
and why isn't it that the courts and the police and there's an organization that handles abuse of children, treating this as abuse of children? When you have a clear case of someone denying medical attention to a child because of some wacky religious belief, that ought to be a criminal conviction for child abuse.
well, apparently in Pennsylvania it is now, according to their
that's just one state. This
court.
needs to go, nationwide.
State Superior Court. Is that the same as a Supreme Court? State Supreme
Superior
Court?
No. Superior Court would be.
Well, let's hope it stands up to the concerted effort that religionists are going to make to try to knock that down. I want to remind everyone once again of our "We don't hate you, we just think you're wrong" buttons. This is the slogan of our show, because Christians are always asking us, why do you hate us so much? We don't hate you.
TV, we can do strange things like this.
Okay. That's... Wow! That's a great picture. Okay. We don't hate you, Christians. We just think you're wrong. All right? And when we see things like, faith healers hurting people by getting them to turn to the faith healing because of their religious beliefs rather than taking advantage of modern medical science, that worries us. It worries us about our society, so we speak out. When we see things like people claiming that our legal system is based on the Ten Commandments, that worries us because no, it's not. And the problem is that if the religionists convince everyone that our legal system is based on the Ten Commandments, that just opens the door to shoehorn in all kinds of crazy beliefs from Christianity and turn them into law, and we're against that.
Well, there are even some that go so far as to say that the words a wall of separation between church and state did not exist before 1954. And those are Thomas Jefferson's words in the letter to the Danbury Baptist. And it was quoted by a judge in a case against school prayer in 1954, but I don't remember the name of the case.
Right.
And he quoted that directly. And they have retranslated that to say that the judge is the first one to say that.
Right.
And come on, man, do some.
Well, that just goes to show in one of our earlier shows we had something about there being 2,000-year-old people running around. Yeah. There are. Thomas Jefferson is one of them.
What we did about 5 minutes ago?
So, yes.
What are you talking about?
Thomas Jefferson is one of those 2,000-year-old people that's running around then, apparently. If it was only came up...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Then you must have said it then.
All right.
First occurrence.
Here's another creepy story. Clergy provision removed from counselor's bill in Michigan. A bill prohibiting sexual relations between counselors and their clients is on its way to the Michigan State Senate, but with all references to clergy removed. The Senate Judiciary Committee this week approved the bill, this week again being sometime in December or November, I'm sorry about that, of 2000, because you might be seeing this. Who knows when we'll rerun this tape. The Senate Judiciary Committee approved the bill, which makes it a crime for state-licensed mental health professionals to have sex with their clients, even with the client's consent. However, the bill passed only after its sponsor pulled out a controversial provision that would have applied the same penalty to ministers counseling church members. The State House last year passed a bill containing that provision. Okay, just the House, not the Senate. Representative John Jalema, Republican Grand Haven, said he withdrew the provision after judging the bill stood no chance as long as the clergy were included. It certainly deflects the original intent of the bill, Jalema said, noting that the bill was aimed first at clergy and marriage counselors, but later expanded to include therapists. So the whole point why this bill came up was specifically to target those groups. And then the licensed mental health professionals were added in, and then after they had that hook, the opponents got the reference to clergy pulled out. A strong opposition from some legislators and religious leaders, gee, I wonder which ones, made it necessary to delete the clergy provisions in order for any bill to pass before the legislature adjourned that month, he said. And I want to take a moment to big thumbs up for a Republican standing up in favor of forcing religion to play nice. A Grand Rapids clinical psychologist who lobbied for the original bill said the revised version is still an important step. We feel like we have a victory here, said Teresa Anderson Varney, chairwoman of the Michigan Coalition on Sexual Exploitation by Helping Professionals. What's important is for Michigan to become the 19th state that criminalizes sexual contact between therapists and clients. If the bill passes, the coalition will work to stiffen penalties and include clergy eventually, she added. And a big thumbs up for those folks. Being a minister does not make you above the law.
There's a funny thing you mentioned in here that even if the patient consents, how does a patient consent to sex with someone who's supposed to be treating them for some mental illness or some?
Not all mental illnesses make it impossible to say the words, "Oh yes, please do me." Right.
Well, in the context of someone, providing psychological therapy, or even in the case of the clergy providing just comfort, which is about all they could do. There's someone who's come to you who's troubled, who's got something going on that's wrong. They have other issues right now, and if you're taking advantage of their I don't know what the word
vulnerability.
Vulnerability. That's the word I'm looking for. You're taking advantage of the vulnerability. How are you helping them? And how could you even conceive that you are helping?
Right. Well, that's clearly the reason for this law. Right. Clearly.
Yeah. But
I'd like to segue for a moment into this personal territory. Okay. My parents are both ministers, and one of the creepiest things about that, they only became ministers after I was grown up and out of the house. Okay. So I wasn't raised by people who were ministers at the time. One of the creepiest things about their lifestyle is the way that people treat them like miniature gods. It's really, really disturbing. Mm-hmm. My mom is always going on about how, our parishioners are so nice, not like the last church, when what she means is the people at this church are wealthier and can bring them more pies right, than the people in the last parish where, they didn't go out of their way quite so frequently to, give them little gifts and cut them deals on cars like my dad was trying to do. Stuff like that. I mean, it's just disturbing that to watch, not just that they're getting special perks, right? That's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is the way that I see my parents interpreting the special perks as a sign of how kind and generous their parishioners are, and not as like, gee, don't we have a responsibility to be, ethical here? Maybe we shouldn't be encouraging them to give us gifts. Aren't we here to serve them and not the other way around? It just never crosses their minds. Very, very creepy.
There to serve them. I've never met anyone. Well, I haven't got a long history of meeting people from clergy, but the ones that I have met they're in it for the money. It's an easy job. If I had less ethics, I'd be a priest.
Methodists are not like fundamentalists, okay?
It depends on what Methodists you're talking to.
That's true, but in general, the Methodists are relatively liberal. You would think, and I grew up and my parents weren't ministers at the time, but they were churchgoers, right? I got dragged to that place all the time. My understanding as a kid was that this was supposed to be there the minister was supposed to be there to help the people that came to the church, right? That's what it was supposed to be all about. It was not supposed to be all about, gee, how many gifts can they give us to show how nice they are? Very, very creepy.
We didn't really go to church when I was a kid, and the reason we didn't go to church was because my mom could not tolerate the attitude, because it was a Methodist church, of looking at everybody and talking about them, about how much money they had put in the collection plate, or what kind of clothes they were wearing, or what kind of car they drove, what kind of job they had, this, that, and the other thing. Just how affluent were you, and if you weren't affluent enough, then you just weren't like one of us. And those are those other people that
most superficial things that you can count on.
Oh, they were. They were very superficial.
It's horrible.
Now, I don't really remember this because I was a little kid when we stopped going. We only went a few dozen times, but this was the stories that she told of why she didn't want to go back.
Well, lucky you.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Were your parents religious? Are your parents religious?
My father has always been religious. My mother used to be, but has since fallen out of it somewhat. Still believes that in some form of a god or higher power.
Sure.
But not necessarily this is the word of God.
Right.
Type thing.
Yeah.
My dad does go to church, and I used to go with him up until about 11th grade or something like that. And before I finally convinced them that no, I don't need this anymore.
I just thought of something, because someone's going to see this, and they're going to take what I just said as you had a bad experience with church, and you haven't been taught the real Jesus story, and blah 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 blah. So that's I've had that run into that one before.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, I am not an atheist because I had a bad experience with religion. In fact, I've had a very happy life. I've been incredibly lucky and privileged compared to most people. I became an atheist because the God that I believed in when I believed, right? I thought that the God that I believed in couldn't possibly, being a loving guy and having respect for us, right, and for our rights and for wanting nice things for us, couldn't possibly condemn me to eternal hellfire for asking my questions and using the brain that I believed he'd given me. And as soon as I reached that conclusion, a few short days later, I decided, boy, hey, I'm an atheist. Because none of this stuff makes any sense. No, it's not. In most cases, most atheists I've talked to have never had any, terrible life experience that drove them away from God. That is a myth that Christians tell each other to console themselves about the fact that there are atheists at all. Okay, the vast majority of atheists that I know are atheists because they've actually thought about this stuff clearly and without feeling like they were going to get in trouble if they did.
Well, not being indoctrinated into the church at a young age, I had this, position that I could stand back and look at it all, and so it wasn't really difficult at all to come to the conclusion that this was nonsense. And why these people? What really puzzled me is how could reasonably intelligent people that I was seeing every day believe this stuff? You go into another discussion over something else, and they're perfectly reasonable, rational people. You bring religion to it, all that just falls right out the window. How is it that people who are smart, intelligent, and rational can believe in the big invisible spook? I don't get that.
Well,
mine was always a little bit different. When I was young, I used to always listen to what they said in church and stuff like that, and I saw no reason to believe, apart from, eternal hellfire and stuff like that. I couldn't find any evidence that I can't see how else in the universe this book could have gotten here other than divine creator.
That's not an actual Bible,
This book,
okay.
Bible, anything.
Okay.
This pencil.
This was thicker.
This
I see what you're saying.
got here by natural
Sorry,
processes.
I misinterpreted you.
This got here through natural processes. God did not put this here for me.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I was young, I used to always...
I hate to jump in like this, but I think Christians watching the show are going to think that you just claimed that grew on a bush somewhere. That's not what you mean, right?
Well, no, of course not.
What you mean is the matter that's in it.
Yes, the matter and how this came to be a pencil can be explained. The
right.
wood grew, the graphite is in the earth,
and then people took those things and put it all
together.
them
together, and this is the result.
And then the Christians are going to say, well, see, for a thing as complex as a pencil to come into existence, there has to be some outside guy making it happen.
Of course,
right.
Us. We put them together.
Right.
But anyway, I used to sit in bed when I was young and just say, I see no reason for there to be a God. God, if you're listening, if you can just make this move, just do one little miracle, I'm yours forever.
Yeah.
I promise.
Yeah.
But if you just do that, and I'll sit there and watch it, and nothing happens.
You're not supposed to tempt God.
I did something like that because right about the age of 13, I got confused and decided I was going to force myself to believe, and really tried because everybody's saying this is true.
Yeah.
There must be something to that, right?
Yeah.
And for a while there, I gave it a good shot, and it just didn't wash. I couldn't do it. But I'd do the same thing. I would talk to the ceiling and ask for the ceiling, almighty ceiling. I was calling him God at the time. Almighty God, would you please just do this one little thing for me? And of course, that never happened. Mm-hmm. And
guys, I keep being driven into the God's advocate here, as opposed to the devil's advocate. Christians, of course, respond to those kinds of stories saying, well, you're not supposed to tempt God, you're supposed to just believe. And that's where there's a problem, okay? Because just believing stuff isn't proof that the stuff you're just believing is true. And, what they tell you is that if you just believe, then it becomes clear, right?
Yeah.
Well, duh! Right? What that is what you're doing is you're asking people to brainwash brainwash themselves. Of course, if you convince yourself to believe something, it will then be clear to you. But that hasn't proved anything either, except that it's possible to make yourself believe incredibly silly things. And you only have to look, if you're a Christian listening to this, you only have to look at other religions that you consider silly for proof that people are capable of convincing themselves of incredibly silly things. So you asked earlier, how can they believe this stuff? And I think there's one major factor, and the one major factor is a critical mass of believers. If you got a support group of people around you all the time, or enough street preachers, or enough people going door to door, right? If there's enough God references on TV and everywhere, enough city council meetings opening with prayers, if it's pervasive enough in your culture, then you've got no particular reason to question it, right? I mean, if you don't make a point in your life of just questioning things and seeing how much sense they make on their own. And I think for the vast majority of people, that's probably it, right? Yeah. They just don't. They're not like many atheists I've met who really make it a hobby almost to think about stuff, to think about all kinds of stuff on and to see what its actual merits are. But people that don't make a habit of that, why should they question it?
And I went through that, like I said, at same stage. Everybody was saying this was true, so there must be something to it.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that everybody can say it's true, and that still doesn't make it true.
And look what's happening in England, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we read those statistics. The critical mass is gone, and that archbishop is going, we can't keep our deal going anymore. What's the deal, right? 4% of the public coming to church regularly is just not enough to keep our coffers full. Well,
we got these big buildings to maintain, and
So of course it behooves Christianity. It's in the best interest of Christianity to lash out at atheists and non-belief and accuse us of being immoral and stuff in order to frighten people off from either being atheists or possibly more importantly admitting that we're atheists. Okay, because the more atheists there are in public, the closer you are to losing your critical mass, Christians, and people will start feeling that it's perfectly okay to question this stuff. And then we might see a big change. Speaking of moral traits, this was something that I've read before in the show, but I think this dovetails nicely with... Dovetails? Is that the right word? Comes in? I thought dovetail. Maybe. Okay. It makes sense, considering what we're talking about. These are some statistics compiled by the Barna Research Group, which is not an atheist research group. This is a Christian research group that compiles statistics, and I think they probably do it to frighten Christians into behaving, but we can use it for our purposes. This compares born-again Christians with non-Christians on a number of issues that they consider to have moral relevance. Okay, for example, have been divorced among those who have been married. 27% of born-again Christians who have been married get divorced, according to this study. Only 23% of non-Christians.
That's pretty close.
Pretty close.
That could also be considered a timing thing.
They
became born-again Christians after their divorce.
But you will. That's possible. There are separate characteristics which show that the divorce rates are higher in the states that have the highest percentage of churchgoers in general.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I have heard that. Yeah.
But you're about to see a trend. So keep listening. Gave money to a homeless person or poor person in the past year. Born-again Christians, 24%. Non-Christians, 34%. Gosh. So what was this again about non-Christians being less moral than Christians? Took drugs or medication described for depression in the last year. Now, Christians are always going around saying, you need Christ in your life to be happy. Yes. Right? You would expect, if that was true, to see a huge difference in these statistics. Well, it's born-again Christians 7%, non-Christians a whopping 8%.
So relatively the same.
Yeah,
Pretty much the same.
Way within the limits of statistical probability.
So why is it now that Jesus didn't make that 7% a little happier?
Even if those statistics are exactly accurate, hey, I'll trade in freedom of thought for a 1% greater risk of depression any day.
There you go.
Watched an X-rated movie in the past 3 months. Christians, born-again Christians, 9%. Non-Christians, 16%. Okay, you got us there. We like our porn. But on the other hand, there are independent statistics from people who work in the hotel industry.
Yes,
that when there are Baptist conventions in town, the number of viewings of the special adult movie channons in their rooms skyrockets.
Goes way up. Yes.
So I'm willing to suspect, though, I don't care. I mean, if Christians want to miss out on watching the hot porn, that's okay with me. But I'm willing to suspect that, in fact, what's happening here is they're just not fessing up.
Yeah.
Read all or part of a book for pleasure in the past week. Now, these would not be pornographic books. Or maybe they are. Born-again Christians, 50%. Non-Christians, 57%. Now, that's not a huge difference, though it does tend to indicate that non-Christians are more likely to read than Christians are. But you got to factor in, what is the book that the born-again Christians are most likely to be reading in that week?
Well, for pleasure.
For pleasure?
Yeah,
For pleasure.
It said there for pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Reading for pleasure means reading something like a novel or
Not
whatever.
to Christians.
Not
Not to Christians.
necessarily.
Not based on what they tell me.
For pleasure,
Well-
I read business books. I read
science
books, and so that's
There you go.
For some people, that is
Same
fine.
thing. Reading the same book over and over again kind of
Doesn't count.
casts aspersions on that 50% figure. Donated any money to a non-profit organization in the past month. Born-again Christians, 47%. Non-Christians, 48%. Close enough to be essentially equal, though we're upper percent on this one, where we were down 1% on the depression prescriptions.
We get depressed to give our money away more often.
Bought a lottery ticket in the past week. Born-again Christians, 23%. Non-Christians, 27%. I'm actually embarrassed by that one, because I would hope that among non-Christians you'd have a higher percentage of, rationalists who know that lotteries are really, really stupid ways to spend your money. But, okay, fine.
I bought a lottery ticket last week.
Yeah, it was a really, really stupid way to spend your money.
It was only $1, what the heck? It's a game.
Yeah.
It's a game. You spend more money going to the video arcade playing games that you can't possibly get any money out of.
It is way more fun to spend $1 on a game, on like two or four games of Space Invaders.
Yeah.
Than it is to
you get
spend
some
$1.
enjoyment out of it.
Than it is to spend $1 on this
spent way
lottery
more
ticket,
money-
which gives you like a 1 in a million chance of
I
getting
spent
anything.
way more money at a beer drinking episode the other day than I did on my lottery ticket.
And you had more fun then too.
And I had fun then too,
bet
but
you
if
anything.
I'd have won that $1 million, I'd have had a lot of fun.
We can do it. I guess we're going to need to do another episode on the whole gambling thing.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
actually,
Clearly,
the gambling
clearly, what they're
was-
after with this statistic, right, is gambling bad. No, gambling not evil. Gambling stupid. Okay.
it depends on what you're doing with it. I mean, I was spending $1 on a lottery ticket on an off chance that you might get some money is $1. You didn't
Take
really,
$1 and throw it out in the street, Vic.
if you go out there and spend
It
your
could
entire
be
paycheck
you have
on
as
a
good a
lottery
chance
ticket.
of some homeless person who's really Howard Hughes picking up the $1 and then leaving you $1 million in his will.
You have a better chance of getting struck by lightning than you have to win
Yes.
the lottery.
There you go.
The lottery,
What the
I think,
hell?
is around 1 in 10 to 15 million.
Yeah,
in that range.
it's a really, really high
So-
number.
Shall we go on?
And I
Amanda's-
think we might have a note from off-camera.
Yes, Manda.
Do more atheists get hit by lightning?
That would be do more atheists get hit by lightning? That's a very interesting statistic that we don't have at our fingertips. We'll have to
still
God
buying
is
lottery tickets.
systematically striking us down.
Let's keep going. No, we don't know that. But of course, if that were true, I would be willing to entertain the notion that counted as evidence. Attended a community meeting on local issue in the past year. Okay, born-again Christians 37%, non-Christians 42%. Significantly more Christians involved in public issues.
And that's surprisingly high across the board. I didn't think it would be quite that high.
Yeah, given the
But
state
I'll
of
tell you,
apathy-
I never did until I became an atheist and an activist.
Yeah.
Let's see. Attended a community meeting on... Oh, that is a repeat of the same stuff. Next one. Feel completely or very successful in life. Born-again Christians, 58%. Non-Christians, 49%. According to that, that may be where they're getting that, being a Christian makes you happier thing.
Or it could be that in this life I am suffering, but that just means I get to go to Happy Land.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it
they
could be
have that valve,
could
but
be something
hey,
like
It
but
could be
hey, it's a
that
valve.
it could be that non-Christians, particularly atheists, are always going to be trying to strive a little harder. So you're never going to be completely happy. You always got that little bit extra. You
I can always be
Yeah.
happy.
Or it could be that born again Christians simply have much lower expectations.
That too.
Let's see, and okay, but let's not brush that off. Okay, I'll count that as a score in their column. Okay, versus the 3 or 4 we've already racked up.
We're depressed and we're unhappy with our lives.
Us non-Christians
And we
have
watch
racked up.
porno to get
And
over
we watch porno to get off.
It is impossible. Okay, how many said it is impossible to get ahead because of your financial debt? Born again Christians 33%, non-Christians 39%. Okay.
It depends on the time frame you're
Close.
talking about.
Close. No, we'll count that as a half a score in their column. That's pretty close, but they're a little bit ahead. You are still trying to figure out the purpose of life. Born again Christians 36%, Non-Christians, 47%. Yeah, but a purpose of life is only worth something to you if it happens to be true. Satisfied with your life these days, born-again... Now, keep bearing in mind those last few statistics I read. Satisfied with your life these days, born-again Christians, 69%. Non-Christians, 68%. Once again, there's that 1% gap.
Very close.
We're essentially just as satisfied with our lives these days, even if we don't feel we're necessarily as successful as Christians think they are, and even if we don't think we know the secret of life like they think they do, right? We feel as satisfied as they do.
That number seems a little low on both sides, though. I mean, there's really 30% of the people who are not satisfied with their life.
Raise your hand at the table if you are satisfied with your life these days.
I mean, I could always find something to improve.
You
on.
are satisfied with your life these days?
It can always be better.
I'm actually not at the moment.
But
I intend to work on it.
How you interpret the question. Are you satisfied with life overall, or are you satisfied with your present condition?
Well, you can contact the Barno Research Group and ask them. Finally, your personal financial situation is getting better. Are any of the rest of you puzzled by the number of financial-related questions and debt-related questions that are on this particular...
That's true. You can't get ahead. You're gambling.
Given the
this is a survey on morals, and yet, is your financial situation better? Is it impossible to get ahead because of your debt? Or do you feel completely successful? Did you buy a lottery ticket? Did you donate any money? Money.
But then again, this does focus on our society, though. I'm assuming that this was a U.S. survey.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., we are very materialistic. We do focus on money a lot. So whether or not religion has anything to do with that, it's still a society that focuses on money.
Protestant denominations of Christianity are very focused on money.
Okay.
Very focused on
Anyway, Barna concludes, we think and behave no differently from anyone else. Well, actually there are a few differences, but they very closely match, some slightly better scores on the side of born-again Christians, some slightly better scores on the side of non-Christians.
I weighed out overall.
Me counting this list, the only ones where they score better are the ones where it's a question of, opinion. And... just having the opinion that everything is okay don't mean that it is. Okay, now, what do you guys think about this?
I wouldn't trust that poll for...
Do you think that they think it's just whipped up by this guy in order to try to get Christians to feel more guilty?
Well, I wouldn't trust statistics to begin with. There are polls, particularly polls in areas like that where the answers can fluctuate so much depending on how you ask the question and who you ask it to.
Sure.
It's
may be
a little telling.
We don't know how many different people they asked.
Yeah.
Right?
It may be a little telling,
and
but
we do
it's
know
not
they might conceivably have
rely as a decision maker on.
Okay.
Plus, you can always have questions that are weighted in such a way that you cannot answer in any particular.
But on the question of morality, what do you guys say to Christians who assert that you need Christianity to be moral?
This came up as a discussion, and Paul Wilson was talking about it. And Paul Wilson likes to talk about this subject. That given that if you really seriously think that morality has to be handed to you from an outside influence, you have no possible conception of what it is to be moral in the first place. You cannot even imagine, because you have to have it handed to you. I mean, to be moral, and I generally use the term ethics because, relatively the same thing, but, when you get into morals, you get into that religious kind of area, and it has those baggage attached to it. Mm-hmm. But in order to be a moral, ethical person, you have to actually think about what it is to be moral and ethical. And this is not something you do if you're considering morality handed to you by this, the invisible space pixie.
Right.
Getting something morality out of a 2,000-year-old document.
Following the rules.
You.
Take it from me. I will wave my credentials around right now. I'm a game designer, and I'm telling you, following the rules is not the same as understanding why the rules are there or what good those rules do. Okay.
I can use a mechanical analogy. Being able to get the air conditioner to come on is not as good as being able to figure out how the wiring goes so that you can trace what the problem was in the first place.
True. And life is not so simplistic that any one set of hard rules is going to resolve all ethical dilemmas for you. You gotta be able to think about what's going on. Now, of course, this is where Christians jump in and go, situational ethics. Folks, if you're not taking into account the situation you're in, you're not being ethical. You're just following rules. That's not the same thing, right? If you're, of course, you can have general principles of how to behave, right? Like, be kind to people, don't rip people off, be honest, right? Those are all great principles. But the nature of life is you get into situations where you gotta make tough choices, right? I don't want my dog to feel pain, but I think it would be bad, but I think it is bad to take a life, right? And my dog has some terrible, painful illness. Right, and I'm using dogs, so it's less emotionally charged than people, because that's a whole separate can of worms. This is an ethical dilemma, right? Do I put my dog out of its misery, or do I keep him alive because I think that that my dog being alive is more important than it not being in pain? That is a judgment call. If you can't think about that, right, and faced with that tough judgment call, you can't make a decision. You need somebody outside to tell you what to do. Then you're not ethical. You're just somebody who does what you're told.
Yeah, you're a drone.
Yeah.
And you should go ahead and use the example of, should you end somebody, a human life, if they're in terrible, serious pain, because a Christian does not think a dog gets into heaven. They don't have souls, so it's not really going to work for them.
So it's okay to kill them.
Yeah, it's just an animal. It's put down here.
Yeah.
If it's in
I'm
pain
betting
or
there's
something,
enough
you can
Christians.
just
I'm betting there's enough Christians with strong emotional attachments
to their dogs.
Oh, yeah.
To their pets. That it's a valid.
Oh, definitely.
Example. Yeah. Okay, I'm not gonna. I mean, clearly they don't count the obvious implication of there being a heaven when it comes to questions of suicide, right?
Yeah. Suicide just gets you into hell.
So where else can we go with this? We brought up the 10 Commandments earlier. You guys want to get into that can of worms? We're down to just under 3 minutes now.
3 minutes.
Well, 13.
I'm sorry, 13 minutes. Yeah, we can do 10 Commandments. Let's do 10 Commandments. I'm not reading the clock right. Okay. The 10 Commandments. In fact, there aren't 10. If you look in your Bibles, there is at least 20, possibly more than that, depending on exactly where you draw the line. But there are at least two entirely separate sets. The story is that Moses Moses goes up to the mountain, and God recites the popular 10 Commandments to him, and Moses and the people listen from a distance. Then when I say the popular 10 Commandments, I mean the ones that people like to carve onto their monuments on courtroom lawns.
On schools.
The one sitting out in front of the Capitol here?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or behind it.
Then Moses approaches God, who proceeds to go into details, but he doesn't go over all 10 of the popular commandments. For example, there's nothing further on coveting, and there's stuff that has nothing at all to do with the popular 10. For example, what priests are supposed to wear. Then, God gives Moses 2 tablets written by God's own finger. Okay? These tablets contained the 10 popular commandments, or the unmatching elaborations, or both. Then, the people get tired of waiting for Moses and start worshiping a golden calf. When Moses comes down and sees this, he shatters the original set of tablets. Okay? That's the first set. Now it's smashed up. Okay? Only record is word of mouth. Then Moses calls for all of those who are of the Lord, gets them together, and turns around and kills everybody else. 3,000 brothers, friends, and neighbors. There's a nice little episode, just to add a little genocide and violence to the story. Then God tells Moses to get the remaining people moving, but God says he's not going to travel with them because he's so mad that he might destroy them all if he traveled with them. So Moses tells God he needs something to prove that he has God's favor. So God tells Moses to come back up the mountain and bring 2 new blank tablets with him, which he does. Okay. Then Moses cuts out the new tablets, goes up to visits God, bows and scrapes. God proceeds to list a brand new set of 10 commandments, right? Some like the original 10, some like some of the elaborations, and some completely new. God says these words form a covenant which in Exodus 34 chapter 28 verse 28 God calls these the 10 commandments. So that first set, the popular set, is never actually called the 10 commandments in the Bible. This other set is. It's interesting to note this time Moses writes these down himself. God's finger does not trace these out. Okay? Interesting that if this was an historical guy, the set he actually showed to other people, right, are ones in his handwriting. Yeah. Right, the ones that God wrote are the ones. They're smashed up in fragments and you can't read them anymore.
These are the ones by hand of God, but you don't like them, so smash them.
Here's the ones
I wrote.
Here's the 10 actually called the 10 Commandments in Exodus 34:28. 1. Thou shalt worship no other gods. Essentially the same as the normal set. 2. Thou shalt make thee no molten gods. Kind of the same, but the first set says graven images, but close enough. 3. The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep. This has nothing to do with morality. This has nothing to do with the original set of 10, right? And the ones that we put on. People want to put these in classrooms and in courtrooms and on the Capitol steps. Yes, Amanda.
The feast of unleavened bread is the Passover, which is the Egyptian emancipation of the Jewish people.
Feast of unleavened bread is the Passover, Amanda says.
That's when supposedly God came
do
over
we
and
need
killed
to
all the
tell all of our
firstborn
kids that in order to be good kids, they need to keep the Passover? That would make them Jewish, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. Isn't that Christians don't do Passover, do they?
Right. The 10 Commandments is Jewish. This is nothing
here we
to do
go.
with Christianity.
Here we go.
Jewish.
Number 4. 6 days shalt thou work, but on the 7th day thou shalt rest. Okay, that's the same as the first set. Of course, we're now violating that with our 5-day work week. 5. Thou shalt observe the Feast of Weeks. I don't hear Christians clamoring for this commandment, which is one of the 10 commandments according to the Bible. Right. I don't hear Christians clamoring that, we need to have a law, that our legal system is based on the set of commandments that says we have to observe the Feast of Weeks, whatever the heck that is. 6. Thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before the Lord God. Again.
Never heard of that one.
That's not in the what people call the 10 commandments.
1500.
Though, hey, if Christians want to say that it is a moral law that you should only take your kids to church 3 times a year, I'm all for it. 7. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven. Jewish law, Jewish dietary law. It's got nothing to do with the 10 Commandments that Christians like to talk about. But these are the ones in the Bible called the 10 Commandments. 8. Neither shall the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover be left until morning. We just won't have as many school shootings if we teach little kids that.
Of course.
Right?
Exactly.
Not to leave the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover until the next day. 9. The first of the first fruits of thy land shalt thou bring unto the house of the Lord thy God. This is about handing over stuff to the priests, right? To put on the altar, and then from the Nashon behind the scenes later on. That it has nothing to do with what Christians like to call the 10 Commandments. But these are the 10 Commandments. 10. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. Jewish dietary law. This is the one that means that Jews should not have hamburgers, right? Cheeseburgers, sorry. That's 10. These are what the Bible calls the 10 Commandments. Note that in this set of 10 Commandments, the ones the Bible actually uses the words the 10 Commandments for, there's no rule against homicide.
Yeah.
There's no rule against theft. There's no rule against bearing false witness, right? All these things are now permitted.
And adultery.
Adultery. Well, actually...
That was one in the original, isn't it?
Is it?
Yes.
I got the
Thou
other
shalt
one.
not covet thy neighbor's wife or something like that?
Yeah. And actually, that's theft. Because that's coveting all your neighbor's stuff, and wives were treated as property.
Property, so okay.
Which, we can get into that now. Now, folks, what I just read to you, though, check your Bibles, right? Exodus 34, verses 14 to 26. These are the 10 Commandments. They are called the 10 Commandments in Exodus 34, verse 28. Go look it up, okay? Then go back to Exodus 20, verse 3 to 17, and read the adjoining text. Nowhere in there does God say, these here are my 10 Commandments. These are the ones the Christians want to put in schools and on the courthouse steps, right? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I'm sorry, we have freedom of religion in this country, right? If somebody wants to be a Wiccan, a pagan, a Satanist, it's not against the law, right? A Muslim or a Hindu, none of that is against the law. And saying that this forms the basis of our legal system is essentially saying that we don't have freedom of religion in this country. That is a commandment that you got to be a Christian or a Jew. 2, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image of what's in heaven, on earth, or in the sea. They usually leave those words off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
this commandment is not.
All artwork is sin.
This commandment is not limited to gods. And before you go poo-pooing, oh, nobody would ever have a law like that. The Muslims got a law like this at one point. There was a flowering of science and learning in the Arabian part of the world. Right, early in the Middle Ages,
while the Christians were in the Dark Ages, they were
and then the Muslims got their fundamentalist uprising, and it started becoming illegal to have representational imagery. That's why you see all these beautiful designs on Muslim buildings, all little geometric patterns, because that's all you could do for art. Yes, Manda?
Under the Taliban, the persecution of artists who portray human faces is back.
Wow.
There are cities where that's a whipping offense.
In case you can't hear that, we don't know how that's picking up on the microphone. Manda is reminding us that under the Taliban in Afghanistan right now, artists are persecuted for depicting human faces. And note that, this is, with those extra words in that they like to leave off, this is not limited to gods. All representational sculpture is outlawed. Even if interpreted as only applying to religious images, it would violate the rights of Buddhists and anybody else that has religious statues, right? Not to mention the fact that Christians break this one all the time with sculptures of Jesus and Mary and the angels.
Oh, yeah.
Even though, of course, the Catholics, I understand, have their own different verse here.
Yes, the Catholics have a different one.
They've
eliminated the graven images.
Right, because they love them so much. Number 3, thou shalt not take the Lord of thy God in vain. I'm sorry, curtails free speech. We have free speech in this country. It is not against the law to say piss, shit, fuck, right? None of those God, it is not against the law to say any of those things. In fact, we can say them on public access television here, right? And it's not against the rules here.
God damn!
And yet, Christians want this to be considered the basis of our legal system. 4, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The Sabbath day is Saturday. Yeah. It's not Sunday. This is a Jewish law. And it's a holy day. It's not a holy day for non-Christians in any case. If backed by our federal government, this would violate the rights of American non-Jews. Honor thy father and thy mother. This has some merit, but it is vague about what form this honoring should take and how universally it ought to apply. What about abusive parents? Okay, are we to take this as a pronouncement from on high? We can't violate under any circumstances. 6, thou shalt not kill. This is not unique to Christianity, and of course not in the real set of 10 Commandments. 7, thou shalt not commit adultery. Also not unique to Christians, and when they it's reasonable advice, but hardly more important than rape, which isn't even mentioned. And of course it does include women as property. 8, thou shalt not steal. Reasonable advice, but obviously in our culture, we consider some thefts justified. We make a hero of Robin Hood. 9, thou shalt not bear false witness. Not unique to Christianity, and once again, among all of the moral laws, not in the real set of 10 Commandments. And 10, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Oh, I'm sorry, the adultery was actually a separate thing. The neighbor's wife is down here, treating women as property, and the commandment against stealing ought to cover it. Yeah. Folks,
we're going to be...
Thanks for watching, and Christians, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. Bye-bye. Bye.